The evening air buzzed with excitement as people streamed into the city's most prestigious concert venue. Among them was a woman who had been looking forward to this night for the past 3 months. As a senior marketing executive at a renowned firm, she treated herself to VIP tickets the moment they went on sale, imagining how amazing it would feel to experience her favorite artist's performance from the best seats in the house. She remembered the moment she purchased the tickets, staying up until midnight, refreshing the website repeatedly, and finally securing a front-row VIP seat. The joy she felt that night matched her current excitement as she walked through the venue's grand entrance, her designer clutch holding the precious tickets she printed out, along with digital copies on her phone. She always came prepared. The venue's marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the air was filled with the murmur of anticipation from other concertgoers. She had chosen her outfit carefully. A sleek black dress paired with her favorite red-bottomed heels, an outfit that had seen her through numerous business presentations and special occasions. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo, and her confidence shone through her warm smile as she made her way toward the VIP section. Other guests around her chatted excitedly, some taking selfies against the venue's ornate backdrop, others hurrying to get drinks before the show began. She checked her watch. Still 45 minutes until showtime. Perfect timing to settle in, maybe grab a signature cocktail, and soak in the atmosphere she'd been dreaming about. As she approached the VIP entrance, she noticed how the security staff greeted different guests. Some were waved through with a quick glance at their tickets, while others received more thorough checks. She didn't think much of it initially. After all, security was important at such a high-profile event. She pulled out her ticket, holding it ready along with her ID, just as she had done at countless other events. The gentle clicks of her heels against the floor matched her heartbeat as she got closer to the entrance. Around her, the venue was filling up, the excitement building with each passing minute. The VIP section's entrance looked even more impressive up close, with its velvet ropes and gold-plated signs. She could already glimpse the perfect view of the stage from where she'd be sitting. The soft leather of her clutch felt smooth against her fingers as she prepared to present her credentials. Years of corporate experience had taught her to handle important moments with grace and preparation. She'd attended numerous high-profile events before, but something about tonight felt special. Perhaps it was the months of anticipation, or maybe it was the thought of finally seeing her favorite artist perform live from such an incredible vantage point. Through the growing crowd, she could hear the sound check happening on stage, distant drum beats and guitar riffs floating through the air, adding to the building excitement. The lights dimmed and brightened as technicians made their final adjustments, creating a magical atmosphere that made everyone around her pause and look up in wonder. She took a deep breath, taking in the moment, completely unaware that her perfectly planned evening was about to take an unexpected turn. Little did she know that in the next few minutes, her evening would transform from a simple night of entertainment into something far more significant. A moment that would spark a movement and lead to lasting change. But for now, she was simply another excited fan, clutching her VIP ticket, ready to experience what should have been just another beautiful night of music and celebration. The first hint that something was wrong came when she approached the VIP entrance. While other guests walked through with casual nods from the staff, she noticed the security guard's expression shift as she got closer. He held up his hand, stopping her before she could even present her ticket. "Ma'am, I need to see your ticket and ID," he said, his tone notably different from the friendly greetings she'd heard him give to others just moments before. She smiled politely, already reaching into her clutch for the documents she had ready. This wasn't her first time dealing with extra scrutiny, though she had hoped things would be different at such a prestigious venue. "Of course," she replied, maintaining her professional composure as she handed over both items. The security guard examined her ticket with unusual intensity, turning it over several times and holding it up to the light. Behind her, a line was forming, but instead of moving things along, he called over another staff member. "We need to verify this ticket," he announced loudly, causing several nearby people to turn and stare. Her heart sank, not from embarrassment, but from the familiar feeling of being singled out. She had triple-checked everything before coming. The ticket was purchased directly from the venue's official website, and she had both printed and digital copies. "Is there a problem?" she asked calmly, pulling out her phone. "I have the digital ticket and purchase confirmation email as well." She noticed how the same security guard had barely glanced at the tickets of the couple who had entered just before her. The contrast was stark and impossible to ignore. The second staff member arrived, and they huddled together, discussing her ticket in hushed tones while occasionally glancing her way. Around her, other guests continued to stream into the VIP section, some throwing curious looks in her direction. She stood her ground, dignity intact, though her excitement for the evening was quickly being replaced by a familiar disappointment. "We'll need to check this with our supervisor," the first guard announced. "Please step aside." The words stung, but she remained composed, years of corporate experience helping her maintain her professional demeanor. She noticed another guest, also a woman of color, being subjected to similar treatment at a different entrance. Taking a deep breath, she reached for her phone again, this time to record the interaction. She had learned from experience that documentation was crucial in such situations. As she began recording, she noticed how quickly the staff members' attitudes shifted, their body language becoming more guarded, their words more carefully chosen. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor directly," she stated firmly, her voice clear and controlled. "I purchased this VIP ticket months ago through your official website, and I have every form of verification you might need." She wasn't asking for permission anymore. She was stating her rights. Other guests had begun to notice the situation, with some slowing down to observe. A few even stopped, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. She could hear their whispers, some expressing concern, others simply watching the scene unfold. The supervisor finally arrived, a middle-aged man who seemed annoyed at being called over. However, his expression changed when he saw her composed demeanor and the phone recording the interaction. She noticed how he straightened his tie and adjusted his tone, suddenly more aware of the optics of the situation. "There seems to be some confusion," the supervisor began, but she politely interrupted him. "No confusion at all. I have a valid VIP ticket, and I'd like to take my seat. I'm also interested in understanding why my ticket requires such extensive verification when others don't." Her words were measured but firm, carrying the weight of someone who understood exactly what was happening. The entire interaction was taking on a life of its own. What started as a simple ticket check had transformed into a moment that would later be recognized as the catalyst for significant change. As she stood there, surrounded by the growing crowd, she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who had ever faced similar treatment, but hadn't been in a position to challenge it. In moments of injustice, it's often the smallest decisions that make the biggest difference. As she stood there, foam steady in her hand, she made a choice that would ultimately affect thousands of others. Instead of letting anger take over, she channeled her corporate negotiation skills into handling the situation with grace and strategy. "I understand you're doing your job," she said to the supervisor, her voice carrying just enough to be heard by the growing crowd of onlookers. "But I'd like to understand the specific reason why my ticket requires additional verification." She kept her phone recording, making sure to capture both the audio and visual elements of the interaction. The supervisor shifted uncomfortably, aware of the eyes watching them. "It's just standard procedure," he began, but his words trailed off as she pulled up her email confirmation, purchase receipt, and the venue's own ticket policy on her phone. Years of preparing presentations for tough boardroom meetings had taught her the value of having all documentation ready. As this was happening, something remarkable began to unfold. Other guests who had witnessed the situation started approaching, offering their support. A couple mentioned they had walked right through with the same type of ticket, no questions asked. Another guest, a well-known local business owner, stepped forward to say he'd seen similar treatment at other events at this venue. She noticed a young woman in the crowd discreetly recording the scene on her phone. Others were shaking their heads in disapproval at the venue's staff. The energy in the area had shifted. What started as an isolated incident was becoming a moment of collective awareness. Taking advantage of this supportive atmosphere, she maintained her professional demeanor while firmly stating her position. "I'd like to speak with your manager about your ticket verification process," she said, her words clear and purposeful. "And I'd appreciate if you could explain why some guests are being subjected to additional screening while others aren't." The supervisor's radio crackled to life. Someone from upper management was on their way down. The original security guards who had stopped her were now standing awkwardly to the side, their earlier confidence noticeably diminished. The crowd had grown larger, with people delaying their entry to the show to witness what was unfolding. While waiting, he struck up conversations with nearby guests who shared similar experiences. One woman described being questioned about her VIP tickets at a different event last month. Another talked about how her brother faced the same treatment at a sports game. Each story added another piece to a larger puzzle of systemic issues. She pulled out her business card and started collecting contact information from witnesses. Her corporate background had taught her the importance of building a strong case with proper documentation. Some people offered to email her their video recordings of the incident, while others promised to write statements about what they had observed. The venue's senior manager finally arrived, clearly concerned about the situation. Unlike the previous staff members, she could tell this person understood the potential implications of what was happening. The manager's first words were telling. "Mom, please accept our sincerest apologies for any inconvenience." But she wasn't interested in a quick apology to sweep things under the rug. "This isn't about an inconvenience," she replied calmly. "This is about a pattern of behavior that needs to be addressed." She gestured to the small group that had gathered, each person with their own story to share. The manager looked around, taking in the scene, the recording phones, the supportive crowd, the uncomfortable staff members. It was clear this incident wouldn't be easily dismissed or forgotten. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone could feel it. As she was finally escorted to her rightful seat, she knew this was just the beginning. Her phone was filled with new contacts, video evidence, and witness accounts. What started as a simple evening out had transformed into something much more significant, a catalyst for change that would eventually reach far beyond this single venue. The morning after the concert, she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee, her laptop open in front of her. The event itself had been amazing, but her mind kept returning to what happened at the entrance. Her phone was filled with messages from people she'd met last night, each one adding another piece to an increasingly concerning puzzle. Opening her email, she found dozens of new messages. Concert-goers had shared their videos of the incident, each captured from different angles. Others had written detailed accounts of what they witnessed. But what really caught her attention were the messages from people who hadn't even been at the concert. They'd heard about what happened through social media and wanted to share similar experiences at the same venue. She pulled out her favorite notebook, the one she usually reserved for important client meetings, and started organizing the information. Her marketing background kicked in as she created a timeline of events, noting key details and patterns. The stories people shared weren't just about ticket verification. They revealed a deeper issue of selective treatment in premium sections. Taking another sip of coffee, she opened the venue's social media pages. Comments about discriminatory practices had been quietly building up over months, but most had been buried or ignored. She took screenshots, saving each one carefully. Her corporate experience had taught her that documentation wasn't just about collecting information. It was about telling a compelling story that couldn't be ignored. Her phone buzzed with a text from one of the witnesses, a regular concert-goer who had been tracking similar incidents for the past year. He had spreadsheets documenting dates, times, and types of discrimination he observed. "I never knew what to do with this information," his message read. but maybe now it can help. She switched to her laptop and started drafting an email to the venue's corporate office. Years of writing business proposals had prepared her for this moment. She wasn't just filing a complaint, she was building a case. Her email detailed the incident, included witness statements, and pointed out potential violations of civil rights laws. Her tone remained professional but firm, making it clear this wasn't something that could be dismissed with a simple apology. As she worked, more messages kept coming in. A law student who had witnessed the incident offered to help research similar cases. A local business owner shared his own experience with discrimination at the venue during a corporate event. Each message added another layer to what was becoming a powerful story of systemic issues. She created a digital folder, organizing everything meticulously: videos, photos, screenshots, witness statements, and the venue's official policies. Her attention to detail, honed through years of managing high-stakes projects, proved invaluable. She knew that change often came down to having irrefutable evidence that couldn't be explained away. Looking through the venue's ticket policies, she noticed something interesting. Their stated procedures for ticket verification were completely different from what she and others had experienced. She highlighted these discrepancies, adding them to her growing documentation. The contrast between official policy and actual practice was striking. The local business owner she'd met last night called, suggesting they meet for lunch to discuss next steps. Others had reached out about forming a group to address these issues systematically. What started as one incident was quickly evolving into an organized effort for change. By afternoon, she had compiled a comprehensive file that told a clear story. It wasn't just about one night or one person. It was about a pattern that had gone unchallenged for too long. Her coffee had gone cold, but she barely noticed. She was too focused on transforming all these individual experiences into something that could create real change. As she finished organizing the last of the evidence, she realized this was bigger than just getting an apology or compensation. This was about making sure nobody else would have to go through the same experience. The documentation she'd gathered wasn't just evidence. It was the foundation for meaningful change. 1 week after the concert incident, she sat in a downtown office, surrounded by civil rights attorneys who listened intently as she presented her evidence. The small conference room felt charged with purpose as she opened her laptop and began sharing the countless stories she'd collected. What convinced me to come here wasn't just my experience, she explained, pulling up videos from that night. It's the hundreds of messages I've received since then. Her voice remained steady as she clicked through emails, social media posts, and documented incidents that painted a clear picture of systematic discrimination. The lead attorney leaned forward, examining the spreadsheets she created. "This is incredibly well organized," she noted, impressed by the detailed documentation. "You've done half our job already." It was a small compliment, but it validated the countless hours spent organizing the evidence. As they discussed the case, her phone kept buzzing with new messages. A local news reporter wanted to discuss the story. Community leaders had reached out about similar issues at other venues. What started as one person's stand was growing into something much larger. She pulled up the venue's official response to her complaint, a generic email that offered free tickets to another show. "They're missing the point," she explained, showing how their response ignored the larger issues she'd raised. "This isn't about free tickets. It's about dignity and equal treatment." The meeting shifted as more community members arrived, people who had reached out after hearing about her experience. Each brought their own stories, their own evidence. A retired teacher shared how she'd been questioned about her premium season tickets. A business owner described similar treatment at corporate events. Together, they began mapping out a strategy. It wasn't just about filing a lawsuit. It was about creating lasting change. They discussed policy reforms, staff training programs, and accountability measures that could prevent future incidents. The attorneys explained the legal process ahead, but she was already thinking bigger. Her marketing background had taught her that real change needed both legal pressure and public awareness. She shared her ideas for a broader campaign to address similar issues across the entertainment industry. As the meeting progressed, they were interrupted by breaking news. Other venues owned by the same company were facing similar accusations. Her story had encouraged others to speak up. The ripple effect was beginning to show, turning individual incidents into a pattern that couldn't be ignored. The group discussed next steps: press conferences, community meetings, and discussions with venue management. But what excited her most was the possibility of creating new industry standards for equal treatment. Her professional experience in creating corporate policies could help shape these changes. Near the end of the meeting, she received an unexpected call. A senior executive from the venue's parent company wanted to meet. The tone was different now. No more dismissive responses or generic apologies. They were finally ready to listen. Looking around the room at the diverse group of people who had come together, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about one night at a concert anymore. It was about using this moment to create meaningful change that would benefit countless others. As they wrapped up the meeting, plans were set in motion. Press releases were drafted, community meetings were scheduled, and legal documents were prepared. But most importantly, a movement had started, one that would challenge not just one venue's practices, but an entire industry's approach to equal treatment. Walking out of the office that evening, she felt both tired and energized. The path ahead would be challenging, but she wasn't walking it alone. Sometimes, she reflected, the most important changes start with one person simply saying, "This isn't right." The local news station's bright lights filled the community center as more people stepped forward to share their stories. What had started as one incident had sparked a deeper investigation into the venue's practices, and the findings were impossible to ignore. "We've received over 300 similar complaints," the investigative reporter announced, checking her notes. The camera panned across the room, capturing the faces of people who had gathered to support the cause. Each person there had their own story of being questioned, delayed, or harassed while trying to enjoy premium seats they had rightfully purchased. A retired journalist who had been digging through years of customer complaints shared his findings. "The pattern is clear," he explained, spreading documents across a table. "Premium section complaints show a disturbing trend of selective enforcement." His investigation had uncovered internal emails showing staff were told to give extra scrutiny to certain guests. The original incident had caught the attention of a popular entertainment blog, which then conducted its own investigation. Their reporter had gone undercover to multiple events, documenting how different guests were treated at the entrance. The resulting video went viral, drawing national attention to the issue. In the midst of all this, she received a call from a former employee of the venue. "I quit last year because of this," the ex-staff member revealed. "We were given unwritten rules about who to question more thoroughly." This insider perspective added another crucial piece to the growing evidence. Social media played a huge role in exposing the truth. People began sharing their experiences using a hashtag that quickly gained traction. Videos, photos, and stories poured in from across the country, showing similar problems at other venues owned by the same company. The investigation took an unexpected turn when financial records revealed something interesting. Despite claiming premium seats were frequently targeted by scalpers, their usual excuse for extra screening, data showed almost no actual cases of fraud in these sections. The explanation they had used for years didn't hold up under scrutiny. Community leaders organized a town hall meeting to discuss the broader implications. "This isn't just about concert tickets," one speaker pointed out. "It's about how we're treated in all premium spaces, restaurants, hotels, membership clubs. The same pattern keeps showing up." Local business owners who had hosted corporate events at the venue came forward with their own observations. They described how their guests of color were often subjected to additional questioning or verification, creating embarrassing situations during professional events. The venue's parent company tried to control the narrative by releasing a statement about their comprehensive security procedures. But security experts who reviewed the policies pointed out the flaws in their approach. True security doesn't discriminate, one expert noted in his report. A group of university students studying data analysis volunteered to help process the growing mountain of evidence. They created visualizations showing clear patterns in how different guests were treated. Their findings were hard to dismiss. The numbers told a story that couldn't be explained away. The investigation also revealed that several employees had raised concerns about these practices internally, but their reports were ignored or dismissed. Some had even faced retaliation for speaking up. These revelations added another layer to the growing case. As the evidence mounted, more media outlets picked up the story. What started as a local issue was now being discussed on national news programs. Industry experts began examining similar patterns at entertainment venues across the country, suggesting this was part of a larger problem that needed addressing. By this point, it was clear that the investigation had uncovered something much bigger than one incident. It had exposed a system that needed complete overhaul, not just surface-level changes. The evidence was overwhelming, and the momentum for change was building. The meeting room at corporate headquarters felt different this time. Gone was the defensive attitude from their first response. Instead, the company's top executives sat around the table, faces serious as they reviewed the evidence that could no longer be ignored. "We need to do more than just apologize," the CEO admitted, looking directly at her. The mountain of evidence, media coverage, and public pressure had finally forced them to face reality. The company's stock had taken a hit, and major artists were threatening to cancel their performances unless changes were made. She watched as they scrolled through their phones, reading the latest news coverage. A major music magazine had just published a detailed investigation, interviewing dozens of people who had faced similar treatment at their venues. The story was trending nationwide, with celebrities and influencers sharing their own experiences. "Your suggestions?" the CEO asked, sliding a notebook across the table. This was the moment she'd been preparing for. She pulled out her laptop and opened a detailed presentation, not just complaints, but solutions. Her corporate background had taught her that real change needed clear, actionable steps. The room grew quiet as she outlined her proposals. New training programs developed with civil rights experts. Clear, written policies about ticket verification. Independent auditors to monitor compliance. A community advisory board with real power to oversee changes. Each point was backed by research and examples from other industries that had successfully addressed similar issues. Someone from marketing tried to suggest a quick PR campaign to rebuild trust, but she stopped them mid-sentence. "Trust isn't built through advertisements," she explained. "It's built through actions and transparency." The room nodded in agreement. The old playbook wouldn't work anymore. The company's legal team arrived with draft settlement documents, but this wasn't just about legal compliance. She pushed for broader changes. Scholarships for minority students interested in entertainment management, partnerships with civil rights organizations, and regular public reporting on their progress. As they discussed implementation, her phone buzzed with messages from the community group she'd helped form. They were meeting across town, reviewing the proposed changes. Their input was crucial. This wasn't just about corporate policies, but about real people's experiences. The discussion turned to staff training. She shared stories from former employees who had wanted to speak up but feared retaliation. "We need to change the culture, not just the rules," she emphasized. The HR director took detailed notes, already planning new whistleblower protections and reporting systems. Throughout the meeting, more news kept breaking. Other entertainment venues were announcing their own policy reviews, not wanting to face similar scrutiny. The ripple effects were spreading across the industry, turning one incident into a catalyst for widespread change. The company's initial defensiveness had transformed into genuine engagement. They weren't just agreeing to changes, they were actively suggesting additional improvements. Someone mentioned creating a new executive position focused on equity and inclusion, with real power to make changes. As the meeting wrapped up, the CEO made an unexpected announcement. They wanted her to help oversee the implementation of these changes, offering her a position on their newly formed advisory board. It wasn't just about fixing past mistakes, it was about preventing future ones. Walking out of the building hours later, she felt cautiously optimistic. The hard work was just beginning, but for the first time, it felt like real change was possible. Her phone was filled with messages from people eager to hear about the meeting's outcome. People who had been following this story from the beginning. In the lobby, she passed a maintenance worker who gave her a subtle thumbs up. Small gestures like this reminded her why this fight mattered. It wasn't just about corporate policies or public relations. It was about dignity and respect for everyone who walked through those doors. 3 months later, the venue looked different. Not just physically, with its new signage and redesigned entrance areas, but in the way it felt. The changes weren't just on paper. They were visible in every interaction between staff and guests. The morning started with a training session for new security personnel. She sat in the back of the room, watching as the instructor, a civil rights expert, walked the team through scenarios. "Your job isn't just checking tickets," the trainer explained. "It's making sure everyone feels welcome and respected." Staff members shared their own experiences and asked questions openly. The fear of speaking up had been replaced by genuine engagement. A security guard raised his hand to discuss a situation from the previous night, how he'd handled a ticketing issue fairly and professionally, following the new protocols. The venue's new mobile app was launching that day, allowing all ticket holders to verify their purchases digitally before arriving. This technology, suggested by the Community Advisory Board, eliminated the need for subjective extra verification that had caused so many problems in the past. In the administrative office, the newly appointed Director of Equity and Inclusion was reviewing the latest monitoring reports. Every interaction at the entrance was now documented and analyzed for patterns. The data showed a clear improvement. Complaints about discriminatory treatment had dropped to nearly zero. The Community Advisory Board, meeting in the conference room, represented a diverse cross-section of the city. They weren't just there for show. Their recommendations had real weight. They reviewed feedback from recent events, suggested improvements, and held management accountable for following through on promises. Outside, a local news crew was filming a follow-up story. They interviewed guests from recent events, asking about their experiences. The responses were encouraging. "It's like a completely different place," one regular concert-goer commented. "You can feel the change as soon as you walk in." The venue's social media pages told a similar story. Where once there were complaints about unfair treatment, now there were posts praising the professional and respectful atmosphere. Artists were sharing positive experiences about how their fans were treated, encouraging other venues to follow suit. In the employee break room, she noticed something interesting. Staff members from different departments talking openly about ways to improve guest experiences. The old culture of silence had been replaced by one of active participation in making things better. The afternoon brought a visit from executives of another entertainment company, interested in implementing similar changes at their venues. As she walked them through the new procedures, she could see them taking notes, asking questions about implementation costs and training programs. A group of law students arrived later, studying the case as an example of how corporate culture can be transformed. They interviewed staff members, reviewed the new policies, and examined the monitoring systems put in place to prevent backsliding into old habits. The most significant change was visible at the premium entrance during the evening's concert. The line moved smoothly, with every guest receiving the same professional treatment. The security team worked efficiently, following clear protocols that left no room for bias or discrimination. Regular audits by independent observers helped maintain standards. Tonight's observer, a civil rights attorney, watched the entrance procedures with approval. "This should be the industry standard," she noted, completing her report. As the venue filled up for the evening's show, she watched from near the entrance. Guests of all backgrounds walked in confidently, holding their tickets without anxiety of possible confrontations. The change wasn't just in policies, it was in the atmosphere itself, in the way people carried themselves through the space. 1 year after that fateful concert night, she stood on stage at a national conference for entertainment venue operators. The audience was filled with industry leaders, all eager to learn from what had become known as the turning point case in venue management. Looking out at the crowd, she saw faces of people who had traveled from across the country. Some were venue managers implementing similar changes in their facilities. Others were civil rights advocates working to ensure these improvements became permanent industry standards. All were there because one person had decided to speak up. Change doesn't always start with grand gestures, she began, sharing her story. Sometimes it starts with simply saying, "This isn't right," and having the courage to stand firm. The room was silent, everyone leaning in to hear about the journey from that initial confrontation to industry-wide transformation. Behind her, slides showed the impressive results. Dozens of major venues had adopted the new standards. Customer satisfaction scores were up across the board. More importantly, thousands of people had shared stories of feeling truly welcome in premium spaces for the first time. During the break, venue managers approached her with their own stories of transformation. One spoke about how changing their policies had improved staff morale. Another shared how their venue's reputation had improved in the community. These weren't just statistics. They were real changes affecting real people. The conference hall buzzed with energy as people shared ideas and experiences. Security teams discussed best practices for fair treatment. Marketing directors explored ways to make everyone feel welcome. HR managers exchanged notes on training programs. The industry wasn't just changing, it was eager to change. A young employee from another venue approached her with tears in her eyes. "I used to dread working premium sections," she admitted. "Now I'm proud of how we treat everyone." These personal stories reminded her why the fight had been worth it. Later that day, she participated in a panel discussion with other advocates for change. They talked about the ripple effects, how sports venues, theaters, and even high-end restaurants had started examining their own practices. The movement had grown beyond just concert venues. Her phone buzzed with a message from the Community Advisory Board back home. They were celebrating another milestone: 6 months without a single complaint about discriminatory treatment. The new systems were working, and more importantly, they were lasting. As the conference wrapped up, she was presented with an award, not just for sparking change, but for showing how to implement it effectively. But the real reward was in the hallway conversations, hearing how other venues were making similar transformations. On her flight home, she read through messages from people who had attended recent events at various venues. "I took my daughter to her first concert in the VIP section," one mother wrote. "We walked in feeling like we belonged there." These messages meant more than any award. Back at her local venue, things had changed so much that new employees could hardly believe the old stories. The security team that had once been a source of tension was now known for their professionalism and fairness. Every guest was treated with the same respect, exactly as it should have been all along. Looking back, she realized that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of courage. Her stand hadn't just changed one venue or one company. It had helped transform an entire industry's approach to equality and respect. As she walked into another concert that evening, now as a regular guest, she smiled at the diverse crowd enjoying the VIP section. The change wasn't just in written policies or training programs. It was in the confident smiles of people who knew they wouldn't be questioned about belonging there.